when the cameras showed up, we had the fights. We didn't anticipate they would be in the show. And so...
Well, of course they were going to be in the show.
Yeah, well, you know, there was no real mindset about that. Now you say that,
yeah.
But there was no...
What if the fame that turned you into a household name also destroyed the closest bonds in your life? Today, we uncover the heartbreaking journey of Paul Teutul Jr. from American Chopper. When fans think about American Chopper, they remember roaring engines, sparks flying in the workshop, and gleaming motorcycles rolling out of Orange County choppers. The show became a cultural sensation in the early 2000s, introducing millions of viewers to the craft of custom bike building. At the heart of it all was Paul Teutul Jr., the gifted designer who gave life to many of the most memorable builds on the show. But while audiences marveled at his artistry, the man behind the machines was fighting a very different battle. His greatest tragedy was not about the bikes themselves, but about the collapse of trust, the breakdown of family ties, and the heavy personal cost of fame. Early life and creative beginnings. Paul Michael Teutul Jr. was born on October 2, 1974 in Orange County, New York. He grew up in a world of steel and welding sparks. His father, Paul Teutul Sr., ran Orange County Iron Works, a fabrication shop that exposed young Paul to the art of metalwork from childhood. It was here that he first learned how to weld, cut, and shape steel. What set Paul Jr. apart from others in the shop was his eye for design. While many workers saw raw steel only as building material, he saw potential for beauty and creativity. He possessed an instinct for turning rigid metal into fluid, dynamic shapes. That instinct would one day define his career. When Orange County Choppers was formed as a spin-off of the family's ironworks business in the late 1990s, Paul Jr. stepped in as chief fabricator and designer. It was a natural role for him, and soon his artistry would be showcased to the world. In 2002, Discovery Channel introduced American Chopper to television audiences. The show followed the Teutul family as they built custom motorcycles for clients across the country. It was not just about the mechanics of bike building. It was about deadlines, creativity, and the explosive relationships inside the shop. Paul Jr. quickly emerged as the creative heartbeat of the series. His designs pushed boundaries, combining technical mastery with bold artistic vision. From themed corporate builds to personal creations like the Black Widow bike, his work captured attention and defined the OCC brand. The show's success turned the Teutuls into celebrities almost overnight. Suddenly, Paul Jr. was not just a craftsman. He was a reality television star, recognized across the country. But with fame came pressure, and with pressure came cracks in the most important relationship of his life, the one with his father. Creativity versus control. The tension between Paul Sr. and Paul Jr. became the central drama of American Chopper. Their personalities were as different as their approaches to work. Paul Sr. was a tough, old-school fabricator who built his reputation on discipline and control. He believed in hierarchy, order, and doing things his way. Paul Jr., in contrast, was a visionary artist. He thrived on freedom and innovation. He wanted to experiment, to try new designs, and to push the limits of what a motorcycle could be. The workshop became a stage where these two forces clashed again and again. Their arguments, often caught on camera, were raw and emotional. Doors slammed, voices were raised, and walkouts became common. To the audience, it made compelling television. To Paul Jr., it was a painful reality. What the world saw as entertainment was, for him, the unraveling of a father-son bond. The breaking point. By 2008, the conflict had reached a critical stage. Arguments were no longer just about how a bike should look or whether a deadline could be met. They became deeply personal, laced with insults and bitterness that had built up over years. In April 2009, the tension finally exploded. During one heated confrontation, Paul Sr. fired his own son from Orange County choppers. The moment was televised, turning a private family disaster into a public spectacle. For Paul Jr., it was more than losing a job. It was the loss of his place in the family business, the workshop he had helped shape, and the approval of his father. Leaving the shop was devastating. This was not just any workplace. It was where he had spent countless nights shaping steel, building dreams, and carving his identity. Now he was cast out, separated from his father not only by pride, but by the glare of national television. Courtroom battles and legal disputes. The firing was not the end of the conflict. What followed was a bitter legal war. Paul Jr. owned 20% of Orange County choppers, and his departure raised questions about what would happen to his shares. Paul Sr. moved to buy out his son's stake, but disputes over valuation led to lawsuits. There were appeals, accusations, and years of legal entanglements. For Paul Jr., it was not about the money, it was about fighting for recognition of his role in building OCC. For Paul Sr., it was about keeping control of the empire he believed was his alone. The courtroom became an extension of the workshop battles. Instead of sparks from grinding steel, there were legal arguments filed on paper. Instead of creative disagreements, there were cold disputes over ownership and control. For Paul Jr., every step in the process was a reminder of how far he had fallen from the days when he and his father worked side by side. These battles carried a heavy emotional toll. Paul Jr. was not just losing a business relationship, he was losing his father. The man who had once guided him in the workshop was now his adversary in court. The family bond that should have been unbreakable was fractured, and repairing it seemed impossible. The pain was not limited to business. It spread into personal life, affecting friends, relatives, and colleagues who found themselves caught between the two Pauls. For Junior, the silence between father and son grew heavier with each passing day. The workshop, once a symbol of creativity and family pride, became a place of loss and betrayal. Building Paul Jr. Designs. Despite the heartbreak, Paul Jr. refused to give up. In 2010, he launched his own company, Paul Jr. Designs. This was more than a business decision. It was a statement of independence. He wanted to prove that he could succeed without his father's name, that his creativity was strong enough to stand on its own. The early days of Paul Jr. Designs were not easy. Starting a new company meant financial risk, long hours, and the challenge of building a reputation outside of the shadow of OCC. Yet, Paul Jr. persevered. His new shop produced custom motorcycles that carried his distinct vision, and slowly, clients began to trust him. Though his business found success, the shadow of his father's absence lingered. Each bike he created was both a triumph of artistry and a silent reminder of the family he had lost. Personal losses along the way. While Paul Jr. was working to rebuild his professional life, personal tragedies struck as well. The death of his grandmother, Paul Teutul, was a particularly painful moment. She had been a stabilizing presence in the family, someone who embodied love and unity. Her passing was not only a loss in itself, but also a reminder of how fleeting time can be. Even in moments of grief, reconciliation with his father seemed out of reach. Paul Jr. was forced to mourn not only his grandmother, but also the ongoing estrangement from his father. The pain of losing one family member was amplified by the knowledge that another relationship, though still alive, was slipping further away with each passing day. The cameras that made Paul Jr. famous also magnified his pain. Reality television thrives on conflict, and every fight with his father becomes content for millions of viewers. Arguments that might have been forgotten in private were immortalized on screen, replayed endlessly by fans. For Paul Jr., It was suffocating. He had to live not only with the actual conflict, but with the knowledge that the world was watching. His personal struggles became public property. Critics dissected his choices, and strangers offered opinions about his family. The weight of fame was not just about recognition. It was about carrying wounds in full view of the world. When Paul Jr. left Orange County Choppers, he lost more than a job. He lost his identity, his purpose, and the workshop that had once been his creative sanctuary. For a man whose life had always revolved around family and motorcycles, this was devastating. But out of heartbreak came rebirth. In 2010, Paul Jr. established Paul Jr. Designs, determined to prove his creativity could thrive without the OCC brand. This was his chance to show the world that he was more than just his father's son. Starting fresh was not glamorous. It meant long hours, financial risks, and the challenge of attracting clients while still fighting lawsuits with his father. In the early days, Paul Jr. had little more than his vision and a small team who believed in him. There were nights when he questioned his decision, but bike by bike, he earned respect. The very creativity that had caused fights at OCC now became his greatest strength. Clients wanted his signature touch, and fans supported his independence. Slowly, Paul Jr. Designs grew into a symbol of resilience. Trying to reconnect. Despite the bitterness, Paul Jr. never gave up hope of reconnecting with his father. In 2010, American Chopper, Senior Versus, Jr. aired, focusing on their rivalry. The show highlighted their competing shops, but conversations between them were strained, filled with silence or hostility. Another reunion came in 2020 with American Chopper, The Last Ride. Father and son worked together one final time, and while fans cherished the moment, the tension was still visible. They completed the project, but reconciliation remained incomplete. The lawsuits over Paul Jr.'s 20% stake in OCC dragged on for years. Arguments over valuation and accusations of mismanagement kept the wounds open. The courtroom replaced the workshop, and legal papers replaced bike blueprints. For Paul Jr., these disputes were more than business. They symbolized betrayal. What should have been a family partnership turned into a bitter fight for identity and recognition. The price of fame. Fame magnified the conflict. American Chopper thrived on explosive arguments, and producers encouraged tension for ratings. But for Paul Jr., living his private pain in front of millions was exhausting. Every fight was replayed endlessly, every choice dissected by fans and critics. Fame brought recognition, but stripped away privacy. Paul Jr. became trapped in the role of the estranged son, unable to escape the storyline reality TV had built around him. Through it all, one part of Paul Jr.'s life brought stability: his marriage to Rachel Beaster in 2010 and the birth of their son, Hudson, in 2015. Becoming a husband and father gave him grounding and perspective. For the first time, he could focus on building a healthier family legacy. He often spoke about wanting to provide his son with stability, something he had not always known growing up. Fatherhood became his redemption, giving him a chance to break the cycle. Paul Jr. Designs gradually built a reputation for excellence. His shop produced bikes for private clients, corporations, and special projects. Beyond motorcycles, he expanded into product design and branding, showing his creativity was not limited to two wheels. Each success was proof of his resilience. He had survived being cast out of his father's empire and built something meaningful in its place. Yet every victory also carried the reminder of what had been lost. The real tragedy. The true tragedy of Paul Jr.'s story is not one single event. It is the accumulation of loss, the bond with his father, the family business, and the chance to share a legacy together. Even when they worked side by side in reunions, the closeness was gone. The dream of OCC, once a symbol of family unity, had instead torn the family apart. Fame, lawsuits, and pride left scars that never fully healed. Paul Jr.'s journey offers lessons that go far beyond motorcycles. Family and business can be a dangerous mix, because when bonds break, the wounds are deeper than money can measure. It also shows the hidden toll of fame. What looks glamorous on screen often hides deep pain. For Paul Jr., the cameras magnified conflict and turned private wounds into public entertainment. Most importantly, his story shows resilience. Despite everything, he refused to give up. He built a new company, created his own family, and defined success on his own terms. Paul Teutul Jr.'s life is a mix of triumph and tragedy. He became a star, but at the cost of family. He built beauty from steel, but carried invisible scars from conflict and betrayal. His tragedy is ongoing, but so is his strength. He reminds us that success is not just about fame or fortune. It is about surviving heartbreak, finding new purpose, and choosing to move forward no matter how heavy the past feels. If Paul Jr.'s journey touched you, hit like, subscribe, and share this video. Until next time, goodbye.